So yeah, thanks very much to Diane for the invitation. Thanks to you all for being here, and thanks for Graham with the technical help and taking the time to check this was all working earlier in the week. That's super smooth. Having done so many Zoom things this year, you can really tell the range of them, and it's really nice to be a part of something so smooth and well organized. So yeah, really appreciate that. So Brigs, formerly Toronto Brigantine, we're just coming up on 60 years of operations, was founded in 1962. We'll go a bit more into the history and a bit more into the sort of changes later on. But we're a charitable organization, a not-for-profit, and we've been registered as such since our inception. Again, we'll go a bit more into structure and how things are on board, but I thought just for a bit of a sort of overall, especially given so few of us have been out on the water this year, or not as we would normally hope to be. There's a little segment here from when we had Rick Mercer on board in 2017. He came out and checked out our program, and we took him across from Niagara-on-the-Lake just over to Toronto for the afternoon. And yeah, I'm going to play a segment of that. Hopefully the audio will work for everybody. We're not going to watch the whole thing, but it's 3 or 4 minutes, and just thought it was quite good fun. And there we go, just a little section of yeah, Mr. Mercer on board in 2017. We had a good fun taking him out, and yeah, it was a good bit of publicity for us as well. I thought I would just start with a little bit of my personal background. I know Graham alluded to it. Here's me, 13, holding a grease gun with who is now my best friend Sean on the left there, and also looking like a complete goof in a boat up in Killarney somewhere during a Briggs summer. For me, this was really something that's important, I think, because I don't know, I've got a very close sort of personal connection to this, and it was really, like Graham said, my first opportunity out in the water at all. My mum just found this program via some advertisement at school and said, why don't you go and give this a go? No sort of marine background or anything in my family, and I just kind of fell in love with it. They were short crewed that summer, so I ended up basically coming up for a week and then staying for 6 or 5 or 6 or so. And yeah, look at this goofy guy. Wow, the haircuts were not good back then. And I just thought this was a nice picture of myself, Sean, and all the other watch officers from our time on board Briggs about 10, 12 years later. This is just one of many, many stories, of course, of this program and the lifelong friendships and it's generated. I think the sort of bonds that people form are just extremely close, and that's one of the many benefits from my time on board anyway. So I think the brief structure is this. I'll just kind of take everyone through how we operate and what it's like for a new trainee coming on board and how things are structured on board and how our training works. We'll then look a little bit at just our focus and impact, and then at the kind of changes we've made recently and our strategy going forward. So in the summer, we operate a range of different courses. Trainees show up on day one. Most of them have never sailed before, and we divide them up into 3 watches. So we've got about 6 trainees per watch. So at any time, 18 of the youth on board have never sailed before. We use the old Navy system of 3 red, white, blue watches, and rotate in a sort of 4-hour system, which I'll talk about in a second. And it's worth bearing in mind that in our program, everybody on board is youth except for the captain. So that's a kind of core part of our ideas and our training is you can come on board as a trainee, you can have that initial experience. And if that's, you really fall in love with it, you can come back, you can be a part of our training program, and you can move up through the ranks, and you can learn from those above you, and you can quite quickly kind of gain new experience and responsibilities. So after your first experience on board as a trainee, you might choose to stick with us and become a petty officer. So each watch has a petty officer kind of directly responsible for the trainees and performing all of their day-to-day training. For reference, most of our trainees are kind of 13 to 16. Petty officer might be 14, 15, depending kind of a first year officer on board. And they've got, their bit of responsibility. They've got their own mess. They've got a little bit more kind of a few more luxuries, I guess, such as they are on board a brigantine. We then sometimes have a chief petty officer who kind of coordinates the petty officers and provides some additional support and training. At the head of each watch is a watch officer. This is, again, normally a teenager who's perhaps sort of 15, 16, 17 at this point. They've spent a year at least as a petty officer. They've gone through our training program, they've passed their watch officer exams, and they receive kind of a commission. So this would be the equivalent to a commissioned officer in, you know, a naval system, which is what we're loosely based on. And then at the top of the watch officers, we've got our first mate or executive officer. The first mate is kind of someone who's generally in their final year with us. So they might be 18 or 19 in their last year of high school. They've demonstrated a real commitment to the program. They've probably been through all of these ranks, maybe sailed for 3 or 4 summers on board. And they'll be promoted to first mate, and they're in the kind of standard first mate capacity, very much looking after everything on board. Then in our kind of more outside the watch system, we have a bosun and a bosun's mate who are looking after everything maintenance-wise, rigging, ship systems, bright work, all of that kind of stuff. And we've got a cook and a cook's mate. So all of these approximately 28 or so officers are youth. So the first mate being maybe a young adult, but everyone else on board's youth. And that's something we've managed to maintain throughout our whole history. And it's very important to us, is giving those kind of opportunities based purely on merit and hard work, basically, to the kids that are most promising. Then we sometimes staple on a training officer who is a volunteer adult who comes on board just to help out with general program and training. It might be someone who's particularly experienced in a certain area and could come on board and support with navigation or engineering or weather or something. And then at the top of the pile, of course, is our captain. This is by all accounts a fairly insane job, I would say, because they're effectively a kind of camp counselor, a marine captain, and kind of running a sail training program in one go. The captain is someone who's also very close with the officers because they're kind of under their care often for many years at a time. Our current captain, who's just come on board, is called Christine Chesterman. She sailed in various sort of toll ship programs, and she's starting with us this summer, so we're very excited about that. And she'll be the second female captain in Briggs history as well. We had 1 year female captain in the 90s, but that's also something that we're looking forward to. So that's kind of what the system looks like on board. So we've got between 28 and 30 young people sailing with us in a typical summer course. Now, what is a typical summer course? So we cruise all over the Great Lakes, but we're primarily on Huron, Erie, and Ontario. We like to try and spend at least a month up in Georgian Bay and Manitoulin Island area. As we all know, the cruising is beautiful there. There's lots of harbors and spaces we can get into. So I thought I'd just take us through a very typical course up in Georgian Bay area based on, you know, what we might do this summer. So it might be between our shortest courses are 3 or 4 days, and we go up to about 10. So in this example, we could start in Goderich, for example, and we generally go straight out with the trainees that have come on board, so those 18 brand new kids, and we like to get them straight out for a night at sea because we kind of have that approach of a bit of throwing in the deep end. So once they're divided up in their watches, they'll start on their rotation, head out, spend a night at sea, get to grips with the basics of, you know, sailing the boat and where they're living and the layout of everything and how the heads work and all that sort of classic stuff. Then we'd possibly sail in, spend an evening in Tobermory, spend a bit of time on shore, maybe do a few games, let everyone stretch their legs. Then normally we get into more sort of complex maneuvering. So we'll spend a day tacking, jibing, dowsing, reefing, kind of getting all of those core skills in and practicing that in a interesting area, kind of, you know, where we've got a few bits, you know, islands and things to play around with. So somewhere like that. Then we probably spend another night in port. And then we might cruise down the North Channel, find somewhere to anchor, spend an evening in the bay, maybe do some maintenance and some more kind of hands-on practical skills and less of the seamanship skills. Then we'd spend perhaps a day swimming if there was light wind, overnight in a small town somewhere up there like Gore Bay, ice cream, get some capture the flag or some other games on shore, give people a bit of time to stretch their legs and get off the boat. And then we might head out, spend another night at sea, sail through the night, go in somewhere on the Bruce Peninsula, anchor, row everybody ashore. We don't have any outboards, so everyone's got to put in some exercise, have a campfire, sea shanties, pleasantly reminded by the one we just sung. And then we would head out the next day, perhaps spend a night beating into the wind in my hypothetical scenario here, which I remember from my time on board. And then we'd arrive somewhere like Parry Sound, and all of those 18 trainees who've just joined us will get off the boat. Our crew and petty officers and so on will generally stay on and have a day off and a chance to regroup, do a bit of maintenance, resupply before we get the next batch of 18 trainees the following day. And then they'll go off on a similar route, kind of working our way up and down the lakes. So a typical summer, this is based on 2019, we kind of visited and stopped in these ports, and of course spent lots of nights at sea as well. We don't tend to visit the US. Yesterday we did, or last year, 2019, we did because there was a port appearance festival kind of opportunity there, but generally we stick to the Canadian side because it turns out the teenagers love leaving their passports all over the place. So we've discovered that one the hard way. In terms of onboard activities, we try and sort of break things up. So we generally have a kind of mixture of training during the day. We have some time to relax and just enjoy the environment. We like to give everyone a chance doing everything. So doing some navigation, doing some steering. We like everyone to be able to go up in the rigging and spend time aloft. We want to teach everyone the basics of rope work, of weather, of points of sail, kind of all the core nautical or just kind of marine basics, I guess, or sailing basics. Obviously, we do sometimes get youth on board who are experienced, who might have done some keelboat sailing or some dinghy sailing. So we can sometimes take them a little bit further and give them some other opportunities. And obviously, we're interspersing that as well with more kind of camp style activities, I guess. Like you can see these guys in the bottom right are jumping off the boat to spend some time on shore up in the North Channel. We're lucky being steel hulled that we can, if we've got the water, we can just go straight up and go bows up, as we call it, and people can hop off the front. So we take that opportunity sometimes rather than rowing everyone ashore. But yeah, it's important to us really to kind of work to people's strengths, and if we ever have a trainee or anyone up in our kind of system of ranks who says, hey, I've always really wanted to have a go with this, or can I come and have a look at the chart and see where we are, or oh, how does this work, or how do I top the engine up with oil or whatever, we're always going to give someone, try and work to those strengths and give people the opportunities to sort of learn something new at any point. In terms of the sort of day-to-day schedule, as I mentioned, we are in 3 watches, so we operate a kind of 4-hour on, 8-hour off approximately system, quite different to most vessels these days, which are on kind of 6 on 6 off type of situation. But we find this works well because obviously we're with younger children, so expecting people to do long shifts is a bit ambitious, and this provides a bit more downtime and teaching time. So we have the sort of circular system of an afternoon watch followed by 2 dog watches in order to offset everybody, so you don't always stand the same watch. Then an evening watch, round to a graveyard, middle of the night till 4 in the morning, my personal favorite. A morning watch, deck scrub, sunrise, all of that kind of stuff, forenoon, and then back into the afternoon watch. So when trainees are on watch, they're doing all the kind of operational tasks, maneuvering, hauling on lines, coiling, reefing, steering, and they're required to be on deck at all times. And we have a sort of buddy system, so they're looking out for each other, particularly during night watches. Everybody's in a harness in case they need to go out on the bowsprit or aloft, or in the event of heavy weather. And then off watch, it's kind of a combination of downtime and also supporting with things like cooking, maintenance, and if people are at a loose end, some sort of training and stuff as well. But we do like to just give people the opportunity to just kick back a bit, read a book, and enjoy just being at sea, I guess. So we're not really looking to particularly crack the whip. In addition then to all of our sort of summer training programs, which are running more or less from mapping with the school holidays when our youth crew are available, we also run a winter training program. So I mentioned you've got trainees who are coming on board for this first experience. And those who are really take to it and are excited and want to come back and do more, we offer a winter training program in order to kind of quickly get them up to speed so that the next winter they can come on board as a petty officer and so on up the ranks. It's kind of a two-part, it's kind of a give and take, I guess. We expect a commitment in terms of volunteer hours and support with maintenance, but then the trade-off is that you get to come and sail all summer for free, and you've got some, you're up in the hierarchy on board a bit, you have more responsibility, and when you're in that position of watch officer or first mate, you have really quite a lot of responsibility for your watch and for the vessel as well. So our winter program involves all kinds of things. Here you can see Playfair in dry dock on the top left. That would be, we go out every 5 years generally. So we do all kinds of things really during our winter program. We do a classroom training that's been run remotely right now, as everything else is, but we try and teach. We have a few different kind of classes, as it were. We have a more junior and a more senior, and we teach all of the basics of, in the first year, we teach all the kind of basics of seamanship and safety and weather. And then in our more advanced course, we're going into engineering, collision regulations, crew management, leadership, and more of the softer skills. In addition to that, we're teaching a lot of practical skills as well. So we take the rig down every year, which in itself is quite a task. We we recode our spars most years. There's always lots of metal work to do. Of course, being a steel boat, rope work, rigging, painting, systems related stuff. So we generally are very busy throughout the winter this year, obviously being a little bit of a COVID exception, but our winter training program operates on weekends, and the Friday nights will be a lecture after school time, and then Saturday we have a kind of work day basically. So yeah, we really try and, again, in this format, encourage our participants to work to their strengths. So if there's somebody who's really interested in engineering or really interested in steelwork or woodwork, then we obviously try and focus on those tasks. And you'll find bits of the boat all over the place that have basically been put together by a keen woodworking sort of teenager in the late part of their kind of high school years. So there's a lot of opportunity to really get stuck in and build something that's going to be a part of the boat for kind of going forward, which I always enjoyed and found quite exciting. So that's kind of basically how we operate, and that's not changed a huge amount since our inception, and we think it's quite a powerful model. What we have changed, I guess, is just our understanding of what sail training means today and what its usefulness is and how it's attractive to youth and to parents, and also how our strategy and kind of bringing it to youth in Ontario today and in the Great Lakes area is changing and updating. So this is a part where I particularly, I guess, feel that I'm preaching to the choir, but I just thought I'd go into sail training and kind of what the point of it is, I guess, a little bit more, and why we think it's powerful and why we think it's still relevant. I have forgot my curriculum slide here though, so my apologies. I just thought I'd just lay out our formal curriculum. So moving through these ranks on board, there's a kind of an accompanying combined practical and classroom curriculum. So from the time trainees start on board, they've got a basically a kind of a standard of grades to follow. We've divided these into 5, and they basically broadly match our positions on board. So we like everybody who comes on board as a trainee to leave with their grade 1, which is the very basics, how to do a figure 8 knot, name the points of sail, that kind of thing. And by the time you're up to grade 5 as a first mate, you have a sort of knowledge of effectively everything on board, and you also are accompanying that with more formal Transport Canada regulated requirements. So an example here I've just put up is our grade 3, which is our watch officer requirement. So a lot of that is our requirements that we've defined internally, but we also match it with Transport Canada requirements. So for example, you see circled in red here, we require people to get the domestic vessel safety course, which we sponsor our trainees to go through that. And also for grade 3 is ROC M, Restricted Operator Certificate for Radio. Grade 4 would then have build more on this, and grade 5 would build more on that up to Chief Mate limited domestic ticket. So we have our mates finishing at age 18, 19 with a fairly serious piece of paperwork. And of course, accompanying that in green here is the kind of commitment part. So there's the sea time on board, and there's also the winter program commitment for maintenance. So here we've got 200 hours for the grade 3. So that would be, approximate basic effectively every weekend throughout the winter. So we do expect quite a bit of commitment from our officers in exchange for that, the privilege of, running the boat in the summer, basically. As I said, why sail training? I showed this slide to someone once and they just said because everything's better on an angle. So I think I'll stick that in there. I don't know if it's the correct answer, but we have kind of asked ourselves this as an organization, I guess, in common with lots of sail training organizations worldwide, and we've been part of some wider discussions with our partners, both in Canada and internationally through Sail Training International. Of course, I think for some people, sail training conjures up ideas of, cadetships and kind of Navy style training and everything being very, sort of military and intense and all that kind of thing. We think there's elements of that which are fantastic, but also that we can really bring this into a kind of modern perspective. I think the environment itself of sail training is fantastic because it's something that's just so foreign to everybody. So it doesn't matter where you've come from. If you're on a tall ship, well, with very, very few exceptions, you're as out of your depth as everybody else. So what we really like is we get youth coming on from all kinds of different backgrounds. Some of them are extremely privileged. Some of them have had lots of life experience. Some of them none at all. City kids, rural kids. And this environment is just completely fresh and new for everyone. So it's really an opportunity for people to flourish, to leave things behind them, and just to be able to learn and develop kind of at their own pace. Our unique environment of having everybody basically high school age with the exception of the captain is also a great asset, because rather than having somebody who's kind of experienced and working a job teaching you these new skills, it's basically all coming from your peers. So you might have someone your age who's just had a couple more years experience and has gained the skills teaching you. So it's completely kind of merit based, and it's not based on status or anything else like that. I think it provides a really nice experience for youth to flourish outside traditional kind of teaching curriculums. We all know that there's a big focus in schools on kind of digital skills and on academic performance, which is fantastic, of course, and I wouldn't knock that, having done that route myself. But I think we can provide a really nice complementary and just slightly different experience for youth. So as well as having all this very kind of screen technical focused world, they can come and have this real, experience, which really, I think, complements that. And I like to say an escape from the screen-based world of 2021. I think that's something that we've managed to successfully deliver over the years. And we've, obviously gone through the advent of, personal phones and, all this kind of stuff. But I think we have managed to keep the boat as really quite a precious environment where everybody can just focus on actually living and interacting with the people around them. So I think we like that element of it as well. In terms of our kind of focus bringing sail training and our relevance into 2021, we've done quite a bit of thinking about this over the year, and we've kind of come up with these areas. We always used to say, we even had the slogan as Toronto Brigantine, building character through adventure, which I think is a fantastic catchphrase, but I think the words like building character, we feel to today's audience, are just a little bit less enticing, and they just kind of sound perhaps a little bit vague. So we've kind of come up with these 5 areas that we think spending time on a tall ship, even if you just come out for a week, or indeed probably on any vessel, really shine through for young people. So resilience, we're taking people from perhaps it might be their only or their first experience of an overnight camp, and they're living in close quarters, We've got 18 people hot bunking as trainees on 12 bunks in a single seaman's mess, which is combined with a galley. It's very close quarters. We're sailing in all kinds of weather conditions, heavy weather. You know, you're going to get wet, you're going to get tired, you're going to have all these experiences. And we think that's something, just that degree of challenge is something that's really important and really does create a feeling of resilience and a feeling of kind of grit and determination in young people. Competence is huge for us. We are completely kind of merit-based, and as we've talked about our training program, it's all about giving young people real skills that they can do, that they feel like, yes, I can do this, I can navigate a tall ship, I can, you know, I can de-rig a tall ship, I can use a grinder, and I can weld, and you know, all of these kind of specific interests. Self-confidence, of course, is huge. We are not a sort of contrived training type of situation. It really is, you step on board, you're put in your watch, you're given your 2 or 3 hours of introductory training, and then we're straight out onto the lake. And in order to tack this boat, you know, it's not as straightforward as tacking a couple of head sails. It really does require like 6 to 8 people if we've got full press up. So everybody needs to do things, everyone needs to haul on lines and get stuck in. And I think we see that doing an awful lot for young people, because they're given something that it's not a question of like, oh, I'm going to do this, and then if I don't like it, I'll just wander off and do something else, because you're immediately putting the vessel in, you know, into a tricky situation. So we think that self-confidence is something that's developed and we consistently see coming through in our trainees. Leadership, of course, is really one of the main tenets of our program, and that's probably what we started off as, and it's still very important for us. We're aware that we're giving people opportunities when they're 15, 16, 17 to lead a team of people, to really have responsibility for, you know, a 72-foot vessel and its crew, and to take that seriously and to demonstrate that effectively, and to get the trust and respect of their the officers below them and their trainees. And then, of course, teamwork kind of ties into what we were saying with self-confidence. You know, you're a part of a team, you're a really necessary part of a team, but ultimately everything requires coordination. If we go up to furl one of the square sails, that's 6 people having to work, you know, together to do that. Pulling in one of the sheets for us takes, you know, there's no winches on board, so that's 4 or 5 people. So everything is really a big team effort and a coordinated effort. I think we see reflected in our participants, which we're missing out this summer, of course, having cancelled that from COVID. We see really consistent positive reports of their time on board. So we see that youth are really, I mean, we see that in of course, our officers, our trainees that are coming back to train as officers, but we see consistently positive reports. I think this is something that's just such a different and unusual and special experience for people, that it's really something, even if they've come on board for only a week, they carry with them for years, really. And our kind of top areas that we see in our feedback match these sort of core impact areas that we're going for, and that's kind of where we pulled that from. These were things that over the years, looking at all of our trainee evaluations, we saw these coming up, you know, again and again. I particularly like this one about, I discovered the Great Lakes and Canada's marine heritage. It's something I think all of us, having spent time, you know, very close to the water and on the water, and that being a part of our lives, we maybe forget. But I have met many people in Toronto who I think don't know that it's on a lake, and certainly not one that's you know, something, you know, you can interact with and get out on. I've, you know, personally driven youth up as part of our kind of carpooling program up to join the boat in the summer, and they've never left the GTA at all. And this is, you know, kids 14, 15, 16. So I think this is really, that's something that we shouldn't sort of gloss over. It's a really amazing opportunity to see Canada's wilderness and see the Great Lakes in a kind of medium. That's how a lot of this, you know, a lot of kind of trade and transport in this part of the country historically was done, and still is, even if people aren't so aware of it. So I think we've kind of tried to match what we see our youth get out of our program to what we're trying to deliver and really make that our focus and not be too vague and not be too just, oh, come out and go sailing, because what we've learned from 2021 parents, I think, is that people are expecting some kind of, results or impact from anything that they sort of sign their children up for, and just the osmosis thing of, oh, go and hang out on a tall ship for a week. Well, you and I probably know that that is quite effective. I don't think that's something that's kind of taken for granted. I put up a handful of testimonials here. I think this is a fantastic picture from some of our alumni and some of our parents. I think we often get pretty amazing feedback from parents, particularly of our youth officers who've come on board as a trainee at 13, 14, perhaps very shy, haven't had, much experience outside of kind of school and maybe a few extracurricular activities. And then all of a sudden have kind of found themselves in this environment where they can really, learn, flourish, teach people new things. And we see consistently really positive kind of feedback from parents. And also generally parents are very supportive of the program in other ways. So kind of a range of feedback here. I also thought that I should point out Emily, who's on this call with us here, who's our program coordinator, is there as a teenager furling the course. So hello, Emily.
Hello.
That is you, right? I haven't made that up.
Yeah, it's me, unfortunately.
So I hope that's not been too much kind of existing knowledge for everybody, but hopefully jogged some memories, if nothing else, and brought everyone up to speed with kind of how we're operating and what we're doing. We're just going to go a little bit now through our history to bring us up to speed with where we are today, and then we'll take a bit of a look at our planning for the future. So 1962, we were established as Toronto Brigantine Inc. The program was largely copied from an organization called Brigantine Inc., which runs the St. Lawrence 2. Many of you probably know this, but there have been 3 Great Lakes Brigantines, more or less to the same pattern with some slight differences. The St. Lawrence 2 was built in 1954, I believe. They were all designed by Francis McLaughlin, who's a Kingston-based naval architect. And the concept from the start has been to design a youth sail training vessel. I think that's something that makes us very unique. Sail training organizations around the world operate a variety of boats, but they tend to be converted either from, in some cases, previous commercial sailing vessels, sometimes naval vessels, private, all kinds of different things. A lot of them are hulls that used to be engine hulls and have then put a sailing rig on them. But these boats were built for sail training on the Great Lakes for youth. So everything has been thought out to be kind of just the right size, just the right format, to be challenging, but not to be completely overwhelming. So you notice even in the type of rig, which we'll talk about later, we kind of have one of everything. And in terms of the size of the boat, actually having a square rigger of this size is quite rare. So the idea was really to give a lot to play with and to really, encourage the teamwork and the challenge that you need to sail a square rig, but still keeping it in a sensible format that worked on the Great Lakes. So 62, the organization was started, and 63, Pathfinder was launched. The first season she just sailed as a schooner, hilariously, because they ran out of money or time to get the squares on. So did a year as a schooner, and then ended up with the rig as we see in the picture here. She was then joined in 1972 by the Playfair. So you can see Pathfinder on the left, Playfair in the foreground, and Queen Elizabeth II christening her in Toronto. So this was in 1972, and we believe we're the only serving Canadian vessel to be christened by a reigning monarch. I'm willing to stand corrected on that if anyone brings me up-to-date information, but that's from our research, that's where we think we're at. I would hate to see Transport Canada looking at the capacity restrictions for the number of people on that boat in the picture, but we'll skip that one. But Playfair joined us in 1972, so you can see her there. The lowers have just gone in, the hull's brand new. And then from 72 to 2018, we sailed with the 2 Brigantines, and also we had a number of smaller vessels at different times. There was a couple of sloops, a couple of different boats came in and out of the fleet, but these have always been the core of the fleet. Pathfinder and Playfair, very similar pattern. Playfair being slightly wider, slightly more, just slightly. What's the word I'm looking for? Lighter. There we go. But a very similar pattern. During this time, we also developed the formal kind of winter training program. A lot of changes to the format happened in 1974. I can't remember, it's 3 or 4, I think. Women were allowed on board for the first time, which was a big change. During this time, we also made inroads into the rest of the Great Lakes. So previously, we in the 70s we were just on Lake Ontario, and then we started to sail up through into Georgian Bay, and that was largely because the opportunities for us on Lake Ontario just became a bit restricted due to development, privatization of the shoreline, and also the number of harbors we could get into became smaller. So we've kind of during that time we expanded and made our way up into the other lakes, including onto Superior and Michigan. We've also made a number of trips out onto the East Coast, including down to New York and Halifax and the Eastern Seaboard. But I would say that the boats generally have been thought out and designed for freshwater, and it's always quite a hard season when we take them out there. In 2018, so 2 years ago now, the decision was made to sell the Pathfinder, the original vessel. The story behind this is the result of a number of different kind of converging circumstances. The organization in the early 2000s suffered from sort of a bit of a financial crisis, I guess, and almost went into bankruptcy, and then was in receivership for a while. And the story really from 2000 to 2018 has been trying to restabilize after that. The board in 2018 basically made the decision that as a result of continued long-term debt combined with declining uptake in the program and also increasing maintenance costs, that selling the Pathfinder would be a decision that would basically secure the organization for the future. So it got to the point where it was either we need to restructure and kind of cut our costs, or we're going to end up driving the whole thing into the ground effectively. Why did maintenance costs increase? A large part of this has been due to Transport Canada regulation. So believe it or not, both the Briggs and St. Lawrence 2 as well in Kingston were completely unregulated in 2007. In 2007, somebody from Transport Canada showed up and just said, hold on a second, what's going on here? And it was a fairly collaborative process, but at the end of the day, we got brought under commercial passenger vessel regulation. And up until that point, we've been operating as a private vessel. So we've been doing all of our own inspections, we've been doing our own curriculum and training and all that kind of thing. But basically, in 1 year, we need to do an awful lot of work on the vessel to get it up to standard. We also needed to train all of our crew to Transport Canada standards. So we needed to have fully licensed captains. We needed to have lots of people on board with domestic vessel safety. So the cost of operation basically just went through the roof, combined with the maintenance costs. So all of these converging circumstances led us to retire Pathfinder in 2018. She was sold to a private buyer. However, that completely cleared up the balance sheet, basically. So all of our long-term debt was written off. So for the first time since 1994, we were free of any mortgage debt, which was a huge asset, because of course that frees us up in terms of grant applications. It makes us much more attractive to donors, private sponsorship, and all of the kind of things that go along with that. And then that brings up to 2020. So this has been a huge year for us, really. We made a number, over the past 2 years, we've kind of revamped all kinds of aspects. So we've redone our programming and curriculum. We've had a lot of new people join the board, and the board has expanded from 4 or 5 people to 10 or 11 now. And we took the decision as well to look at some other options for locating the program. So historically, we've been based in Toronto since our inception. But of course, we all know the changing kind of nature of Toronto's waterfront, and the priorities there have meant that it's not an easy place to find a free spot of land to run a charity from. We used to be down at the bottom of Spadina, kind of in the Queen's Quay area, and that was fantastic. And then we moved out to the Portlands, and then the Portlands opportunity closed, and we moved out to Bluffers Park in Scarborough. And with every move, it kind of was to somewhere that was slightly more awkward for our youth crew to get to, and that just made it more tricky for us to run the program. And getting stability was next to impossible. So people would say, no problem, you can have a spot for a year or for 2 years or whatever, but having any kind of solid guarantee became, understandably, it was not something anyone could give us. So we looked at other opportunities. We looked around the Great Lakes, including up on Georgian Bay, out east towards Kingston and other ports along the North Shore. And we also spoke to Hamilton. Hamilton was kind of by far and away the most successful endeavor, partially because the CEO of the Port Authority there, the Hamilton Offshore Port Authority, sailed on Playfair in the 80s. So he already knew about us, he knew about what we did, and he was very keen to try and make it work for us in Hamilton. So they were incredibly welcoming. And over the past year, well, over 2019, we spoke to them about kind of the details of the situation, and they were very accommodating in terms of giving us a free berth, space for a workshop, an office space in one of their buildings, and just really wanted to enter a partnership, which is something that we'd struggled to achieve in Toronto with the Port Authority or the city, or any of the kind of businesses or harbourfront management kind of outfits along the waterfront. So we held a general meeting and decided to, and that was overwhelmingly, I think unanimously, in fact, that vote was taken to move the program down to Hamilton. Of course, always bearing in mind, our history in Toronto, but also that really we're an organization that's looking to serve all of Ontario, all of Canada, really, in terms of our catchment. But certainly that being a vessel that's moving around and visiting different communities, our home base is important, but it sort of need not completely define us. So in conjunction with that change, we obviously realized that we couldn't go around calling ourselves Toronto Brigantine if we were going to move down to Hamilton, and we looked at a few different naming options. Everyone's always called us Brigs. It's always been the shorthand for anyone who sailed on board, for anybody who mentions us, within our community. So we thought, why not just adopt that as our formal name? We're aware of the slight reference to a US military prison, but we thought that given the context and the kind of the history and so on, that there would be sort of limited room for confusion there. So we went ahead as Brigs, with the full legal name as Brigs Youth Sail Training. And that brings us up to today, really. So we are now based formally in Hamilton. The vessels will be in home berth will be in Harbour West Marina there. The office is down on Hilliard Street in Hamilton, and we will have a workshop built in that area as well. Happy to sort of take questions on that and so on later. I thought, given the nature of our sort of the background of everybody here, we could just talk in a little bit more detail about the boat and about where she's going and what we're looking to do with her, and then we'll talk a little about our future plans. So Playfair, as we said, was built in 72, very much on the pattern of Pathfinder and St. Lawrence 2. The arrangement down below, for those of you who've not been on board, is very open plan. We have a big seamen's mess area where all our trainees live. Up forward, we have a small mess for our petty officers, and then we have a wardroom back aft, which accommodates 8 of our or 6 of our senior officers. The only person who's got any privacy is the captain. She has a small cabin. Everything on board is very old school, I guess, for lack of a better word. So it's triple stacked bunks. We have pumped fresh water. We don't have any pressurized water. We don't have any hot water. We just boil where we need to. We do have AC on board, but we limit the use of that very much because we're sort of trying to limit the amount of technology. In terms of safety equipment, we have everything you'd expect. So we've got EPIRB, we have radios, radar, we have a AIS Class B system, and a chart plotter and so on. But all of the navigation that we do on board, we try and do traditionally. So we encourage and kind of effectively restrict the use of the electronic suite for the youth crew. We keep it all, covered up until they can successfully navigate using, dead reckoning, bearings, and trigonometry, and then we will bring in the kind of electronic stuff so that we know that they can go out into the world being exposed to that as well. Playfair here, you can see under more or less what we would call full press, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sails. That's right. We do also get carried away sometimes and make sails out of all kinds of bits and pieces, as everyone knows we love to do. But this is the standard press. So we've got the 2 squares, a course, and a topsail. And then everything else is a staysail up forward, and then we have a gaff rigged main with a main gaff topsail. Mostly we'll reef down the main or reef down the fore topsail when we want to sort of go into heavy weather conditions. We've got quite a lot of options because there's so many different bits of press that we can sort of pull up and take down and play around with. It's quite a neat, I kind of alluded to this earlier, but it's a neat rig to learn on because you've sort of got one of everything. So you have you have a couple of square sails, you have stay sails, you have gaff rigged sails. There's some things you have to climb to deal with. There's some stuff that you've got to deal with on deck. So we feel like we can give people an experience of kind of every different format of sail to some extent in their time on board, and that sets them in pretty good stead when they then go off and sail larger square rigs, because it's basically just copy and pasting the same thing, upwards and onto more masts. So yeah, let's Playfair. The organization, so yeah, here's a good example actually of a picture with a reefed topsail and a reefed main. So that's a nice balanced press for slightly heavier weather if we're out into kind of 20, 25 knots. The setup in the boring shore side, we're very sort of clear that we keep our youth crew and their, we really want to make sure that they know that it's their boat and that they're responsible for it, and that they are they kind of have the pride in the vessel, keeping her looking nice, keeping her safe, and keeping the presentation of themselves and the crew who they're looking after, the junior crew, really up to scratch. So we're always keen to kind of make that clear. And also we've taken some steps recently to involve our youth crew from a governance point of view. So we'll have associate membership of the organization for a crew who are commissioned officers, to try and really increase their participation in the organizational side as well. Then we have our office staff. Emily is our is an example of that. We have our staff on board, which is generally just our captain, sometimes also a training officer. And then we have a huge sort of base of volunteers, many of which who are alumni of our program, and they support with everything from helping out sailing during the school term when we don't have our youth crew, to maintenance, to outreach, all kinds of things really. Our executive director looks after this whole pool, so that's Emily on the call here. Also a graduate of our program, which is very common. Our staff are often program graduates. And then from a governance point of view, we're a membership organization, and we meet annually in the standard way to elect a board of directors who are responsible for governance. Everybody in this pool is a volunteer, with the exception of our staff. So executive director, office, and onboard staff are paid at reasonable, we try and treat our sort of staff as well as possible, but often particularly for the onboard staff, it's kind of a jumping off point into other marine careers. So people might spend a couple of years with us as captain, get some sea time and experience, and obviously do something that they really love, and then move into a career in commercial marine or the Coast Guard or similar. Didn't want to forget our parents here either. I think we have a huge amount of support from the parents of our youth crew, often practical support in terms of volunteering, driving, helping out with lunches during the winter and all that kind of thing, but also just the kind of trust, I guess, and the support to let your your child just really get stuck in and be a part of this program, often in a environment that's, has a lot of different things pulling them in different directions, whether it's academic or other extracurricular. But our parents, I think, really see the value in what we're doing and really support our youth officers throughout that time. And of course, parents as well, just of trainees who are coming on board, even if they don't go through our program. It's a fantastic kind of position to be able to just, we're very grateful to anyone, I guess, who discovers our program and who sees the value in it and who kind of encourages their child or their ward to come on board. In our current sort of COVID climate, it's been very much a bit of a survival strategy, I guess, of the past year, as with many businesses, and we're very grateful to the support of volunteers, donors, and also government for the kind of COVID support. But we remain focused on our current strategic roles, which we've created in line with our move to Hamilton and our name change and our sort of general revamp. So our first major goal is that we want to increase the number of fully funded places on board. Currently, we operate a system where youth pay course fees, and if they can't, then they can apply for bursary funding. We're at about 18% funded places now, but we want to dramatically increase that. So we want to go to 50%, which is an ambitious target, but one that we think we can do. And we would consider increasing that even further if there's demand, because we want this to not at all be about money, but just be about giving anybody the opportunity to take part in our programs. Our second major strategic goal is to increase representation in our program from minority communities. We all know, I think, that the world of sailing, both as a job commercially in the Coast Guard, in the Navy, and in leisure, marine, and in cruising racing, is heavily sort of skewed demographically. We'd like to try and do our bit to adjust that, given that we're often the entry point for people into the marine world. So we want to increase the diversity in our program from where it is now, which is probably similar to the most of, the kind of yachting or sailing world, up to mirroring provincial demographics. And our final strategic goal is to ensure that we invest in the Playfair and keep her safe, high quality, and in good shape, so that we can ensure we maintain Great Lakes sail training until at least 2050 and hopefully well beyond. In order to do this, of course, we need to take some actions. One of them that we've done is we've created, in the name of our retired vessel, the Pathfinder Access Fund. This is our bursary program, the purpose being to subsidize course fees and help us realize that 50% target. So during an application process, youth can ask for support from this program, from this fund, and they then fill in an application, which is a combination of why they want to come on board and also demonstrating family financial need. And then we award that according to our internal policy. And where are we going here? So that's us, Pathfinder Access Fund. So that represents a reasonable financial commitment. It's around $1,200 per trainee per week, give or take, to cover our the cost of operating and maintaining the vessel. And we're aiming to get half of our summer trainees. So we generally have about 150 per summer, and we want to give half of them funding. So that's one of our big kind of targets to achieve that strategic goal. Secondly, we want to develop our community outreach and partnerships. This is meeting the strategic goal of increasing diversity in the program. We appreciate that our networks aren't necessarily the best ones for outreach, because we tend to be quite insular. We have great networks in the sailing community, Coast Guard, commercial marine, and with our alumni, but we're partnering and working hard to partner with youth organizations that serve different groups: low-income youth, youth from visible minorities, youth from different religious backgrounds, and all kinds of different things. So we're working on that in Hamilton, and we've started those partnerships already. And then our final sort of action is that we're running a significant fundraiser to ensure that we can keep the Playfair going. So we're going to be doing a Golden Jubilee refit in 2022-23 winter, to the tune of about $500,000, and our fundraising campaign for that has just started rolling in sort of quiet mode, but we'll be starting a public launch with that this summer. And that is really all the things you'd expect a 50-year-old steel hulled training ship that's never had a refit, all the kind of work that needs doing. So it's a lot of steel work, systems, decking, some engineering stuff, rigging, sails, all kinds of bits and pieces. So we want to try and hit all of those in one big year out of the water in dry dock. And we're looking to commercial partners in Hamilton to support us with that, specifically kind of McKeel Heddle Marine and also the Port Authority. So yeah, that's kind of our big plan in terms of long-term stability from the asset point of view. That takes me to my last couple of closing slides here, which I always like to mention because I know there's a sort of a wide variety of ways that people can get involved with Brigs, support Brigs, if that's the kind of thing that's of interest. The most obvious one is just sign up to our newsletter and follow us on social media. We are on brigs.sailing on Facebook, Instagram. There's lots of fun content, pictures, competitions, offers, all that kind of stuff on there. Just a nice way to stay up to date with the program. Of course, financial contributions are always welcome. Being a registered charity, we offer tax receipts for everything and for all cash contributions, and we can accept those in sort of a wide variety of formats. Many of our alumni donate in a small monthly contribution that's most manageable for them. So we've been encouraging people to do that, and that makes a huge amount of difference as we move to becoming more open access and less reliant on fees. Joining our board or committees, of course, we are operating everything in a committee structure. We have people looking at events, operations, marketing, and fundraising. Supplies or services, always useful. As a kind of fairly standard small business, we require almost everything. So anyone who's got a particular skill set or profession is generally super helpful. Similarly with supplies, with anything in from a point of view of general marine maintenance is useful, but also less technical things like consumables, kitchen supplies or galley supplies, clothing, all that kind of stuff, safety equipment. Promoting and letting people know about Brigs and the opportunity there. Most of our trainees come on board via word of mouth. So it's as simple as, the board kid next door or whatever saying, hey, why don't you give this a try? That's something that's super helpful for us. Corporate sponsorship and charters. We, in the spring and fall, particularly when we're not in our core season, the boat's available to take out for any group or a company or even just a private group of friends. And of course, all of that money goes back into supporting the youth work that we do and keeping the boat going. And just general volunteering. So perhaps board and committees are a bit of a stretch, but we need lots of people always to help with outreach, maintenance, merchandise, and driving and so on. Very last one I thought I'd add in here, given the context, boat donations is something that we have been working on, kind of building that up. It's something that's very common in sail training charities around the world. And we have a volunteer, Mike Burns, who works with us to do independent valuations and donates his time there. And then, of course, there's a gift in kind. The value of that can be tax receipted, and then the vessels are either used for sail training if they're suitable, or we can sell them and we can promote the sail within our network, and then that's of course a way that we can turn that into cash to support operations. Very lastly, if anyone happens to love numbers, be a CPA, know anyone who is, having stepped down as treasurer to become president of Brigs, which has been fantastic, that now does leave that role free. And I thought I'd better mention it just in case anyone was like, shucks, I just retired as a accountant, but I really miss it. So there we go. With that, just wanted to say thanks again and sort of sign off the presentation side here, but super open to any questions on any of that. Happy to sort of skip back to anything throughout the presentation, and thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you very much, Francis. Now we'll start moving into our questions phase. And I'm just going to show you how you can ask questions by virtually raising your hand in Zoom following this, so that we can get all the questions in order and everybody can gets a chance to ask a question. One question, you said the other vessel was sold to a private individual. What are they using for? What are they using it for, and where is it right now?
So it's in Kincardine, just up the east shore of Lake Huron from Goderich. It's basically just being used as a private vessel. So having been registered privately, all of the kind of Transport Canada regulatory side has disappeared. So they're able to sail it just kind of with whoever. But yeah, it's spending the winters over there and then the summers out on the lake. I mean, on that, there's always the kind of, and part of the, the deal when we sold it was that if he's ever looking to sell it, we'll get first refusal. That was in the sort of contract. So if there was ever the kind of demand for it, we'd certainly love to bring the Pathfinder back into sail training, but we also want to stay kind of strict with ourselves and look at the realities of the situation. We're not going to even sort of touch that idea until the Playfair is sailing with a full complement every summer.
Okay, Diane, go ahead, unmute yourself and ask your question.
First of all, Francis, I'd like to congratulate you and the board on what you have done to become free of debt. I think that's critically important in what you're doing. Secondly, I wanted to ask, how much do you charge to charter your boat for a day sail or something like that for an event?
Sure. So, well, yeah, thank you. And certainly it was not an easy decision to make, but it's improved things drastically. And actually as well in the sale of the boat, we paid off most of the debt and the rest of it was forgiven. So we saw an even more kind of substantial gain from that point of view. In terms of private charters, all of our prices are on our website. I believe
Okay.
a day sail, Emily, you might be able to clarify, but I believe a sort of 8-hour day sail is around 1,800. Is that correct?
You're bang on. 1,800.
Okay.
Fantastic. Yeah, we have slightly different rates. So for youth school groups or youth organizations, we have a lower rate, and then for adults or sort of businesses, it's slightly higher. The idea being that then subsidizes the youth rates.
So you actually do it for youth as well as for adults. That's fantastic.
Yeah, we sometimes take schools, for example.
Do you offer tours of the boat at all, or is that a possible fundraiser where you would bring it into Toronto so people could just go below and you would have people on board to answer questions of anybody who's interested?
Yes, so we generally try and do those quite regularly. Certainly whenever we're in a port, and sometimes supporting like an event or whatever, but we call them just open houses or open boats. Generally we don't structure them as a fundraiser. We just have it as an opportunity for people to come and just check out the boat, talk about the program, perhaps bring their kids on board who'd be interested in coming on board for a course and that kind of thing.
Okay, thank you. And again, thank you. Excellent presentation. I loved the review, by the way. Just knowing what the course was all about, again, since I've never been on board as a sailor on that boat.
Okay. No, thank you.
Rob Madsen, go ahead, unmute yourself and ask your question.
Francis, I just want to say what an excellent presentation that was. And I also want to say welcome to Hamilton. We keep our boat at RHYC right next to where the Playfair sits on Iroquois Pier. But I also wanted to ask you about what upgrades you had to make to the brig to meet Transport Canada regulations.
So it was a combination of things. The thing that was the most significant was to do with, and I'm not a naval architect, so I might trip up on this, but a lot of it was to do with basically the hatches, the coamings, and the kind of down flooding angle. the self-righting angle of the Brigs is enormous. They according to the stability curves, they'll pop back up below, above 90 degrees. So we can go over to, 105 or 110, I think, and still, with all the extra buoyancy, pop back up. But Transport Canada didn't consider the wooden hatches that we had to be sufficient. So we had to do a lot of steel work. We added coamings to all of the hatches on deck and did all that stuff. We also had to add a lot of ventilation, additional height on all of our ventilation pipes that come out onto deck. We had to do quite a bit in terms of, and with Pathfinder as well, one of the big things was one of the compartments was too large. So we were going to have to move compartments around, which we never ended up doing because we sold it, but that was kind of the next thing on the agenda. That's the kind of physical boat side of it, and the regulatory side from a crew point of view means that we've gone from nothing basically, which was pre-2007, and after 2007 we need 6 people with domestic vessel safety, as it's now been called. We need a master 150-ton domestic, and we need a chief mate limited 60-ton. So it's quite a significant ticket for a boat that is in fact only registered tonnage of 35. Yeah.
And I suppose it is the registered tonnage that triggered all those requirements.
That, and I mean, that kind of defined, actually Transport Canada is moving things next year. They're doing a big review and moving things to length from tonnage. But yeah, it was about a combination of the category that we fell into, but also our use case. So they consider us a passenger vessel because, yes, our trainees are more than standard passengers because they consider a passenger someone who in an emergency would be completely useless, whereas our trainees in an emergency, in fact, they're given a good briefing on everything from life jackets to procedures to muster stations, life rafts, all of that kind of stuff before we even leave the wall. But if our registration is still as a passenger vessel. So
excellent.
Okay, thank you. Nick, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, thank you very much, Francis. That was a very, very good presentation. I had the opportunity many years ago, back in the early 80s, to be on a corporate day sail, and I was very, very enthusiastically appreciative of all the young people on board and their enthusiasm to show everybody the ropes. I actually got up in the rigging and I had a great time that day. My question is, I'm curious as to see how this sailing season of 2021 is going to impact your vessel this year. Do you have any thoughts of how you'll be able to get out there? Are the restrictions still very tight?
Yeah, so last year was a complete, 2020 summer was a complete write-off. Basically, we didn't, we just had not enough time to prepare anything sensible, and it was easier for us to just lie low and cut expenses and put staff, lay off staff basically, or not take on the summer staff we would have taken on. 2021 we've had a bit more time to prepare. The big crux for us is whether or not Ontario decides to ban overnight summer camps. If they make that decision, then that covers us as a youth, as a youth organization. We stay away from the word camp in publicity, but that's effectively what we are. If they put an outright ban in, then that makes it very tricky for us to operate. And our plan would be to move to a day camp scenario just running out of Hamilton. And we do a lot more shore-based training and kind of other activities to make up for the fact that, we're not able to get out and explore different ports. But what we're hoping for is, rather than a ban on summer camps, some kind of assessment process. So, do you have the correct COVID protocols in place? Hopefully, if, vaccinations are at a stage there where things have stabilized to some extent, this is the more likely scenario. In that case, our plan is when the youth first arrive, new trainees first arrive at the boat, we'll do short turnaround testing for everybody. They'll then have their first kind of introductory chat and briefing in a socially distanced format while we wait to do the results. And when the results come back, we can then obviously make a call on whether or not we can go ahead. If we go ahead, then we will consider the boat a socially isolated bubble for the entire course. And what that would mean in reality is we'd spend a lot less time in ports and communities and spend more time at anchor. Or, if we do go into port, then we'll have a system where youth stay on board and one person goes out to get ice creams or whatever, you know. So that's kind of like the current plan, but it certainly will make for a fairly difficult summer if there's an outright ban, because we're currently selling courses assuming that we're going to be able to operate them according to the schedule. And we appreciate that saying to someone, okay, you're not going to sail from Goderich to Parry Sound anymore, you're going to sail in circles around Western Lake Ontario and do a few games is not going to necessarily result in a complete conversion of income. So yeah, it's a call that we're kind of holding off on for now, but it's really going to be up to Ontario's decision on summer camps.
Thank you for that.
Okay, are there anybody else who wants to ask a question? Please virtually raise your Zoom hand.
I can see Patrick O'Brien's real world hand.
Yeah, but it's I really appreciate if you could raise your Zoom hand, because it's hard for us to keep track of who is trying to raise their hand. Just a minute. Allison came first. Allison, go ahead.
Thanks. Francis, it all sounds fantastic. As you know, I've been following Brigs for quite a long time, and I'm really pleased to hear what you're doing. And believe me, if I'm ever close to Hamilton and have the chance, I'll come over and say hello. So bravo. Thank you very much.
Okay,
thank you, Allison. And yeah, you'd be very welcome, of course, hopefully to come out for a sail.
Okay, go ahead,
well,
Patrick.
I'd love it. Thanks, Francis. We'll see how it goes. Fingers crossed for 2021.
Okay, go ahead, Patrick.
Sorry about that, Graham, but on my Mac, on my MacBook here, the hand thing is off the screen on the right. I can't see it. Anyway, so I've got two questions for Francis. A lovely presentation. Thank you. Very, very interesting. Right at the beginning, or very near the beginning, you showed some still photographs, and one of them, I think, was a girl with a sextant. Do you actually teach celestial navigation?
So yeah, that was sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. That was she's now on our board, Caden, using a sextant there. So we carry a sextant on board. Celestial navigation is something that we touch on when, we will teach people if they get to that point, and I would like to bring it into more regular curriculum. But I think currently the sextants on board are more used for horizontal angles, for doing 3-point fixes off land bearings. So we're using them from that point of view, but certainly, the officers who've been keen and have, shown promise, we've got the materials on board, we've got the sheets, and we've got the sextant to be able to do a celestial fix. Whether or not the accuracy lands them anywhere in the Great Lakes, I don't know, but it would be something that I'd like to bring back into the curriculum properly, because I just think it's a fantastic kind of piece of skill.
I always wish I had done it myself, I must say. But anyway, the other question was your length overall, I think, was 72 feet. Mm-hmm. I was surprised that your maximum sail speed is only 10 knots. What is the waterline length? Is it about 60 or what?
I think our length on deck is 60, so the waterline would be somewhere under that. Emily might be able to clarify. I think probably about 56.
Yeah, I mean, I can look it up real quick, but I think it's around 56. You're
well, that's
probably
about
right.
Yeah, 1.5 times the square root of your waterline. Yeah.
I would be unqualified to say, but from a sort of from the naval architect or from the engineering point of view. But I mean, I guess probably for us, I mean, the boats have sailed faster than that at different times. People have different claims. People have claimed to say Pathfinder at 15 knots and all this kind of stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
Okay, Gordon, go ahead, unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, excuse the voice, but it's a bit weak. Francis, I thoroughly enjoyed the presentation. I have a little bit of investment in the ship. Probably about 6 or 8 years ago, I made some bronze sheaves for one or the other of the ships, or maybe both. And I was promised a sale. I've never had a chance to take up on it, but someday I'll show up on the dock there and say, hey, I want to collect on my sale.
Absolutely, well, you'd be very welcome. And I think if I mean, either through Diane or whoever, but it basically our contact point is office@brigs.ca. So all the contact info is on the website there. And if you don't have the email to hand, just pop us one, and we can certainly make sure that happens in the spring or summer.
Yeah, well, I'll try to get I'll get on your mailing list and try to be a bit of a supporter for what I can.
Fantastic, and thank you for the support with the sheaves as well.
Do you know my friend Hans Nita? I don't know if
doesn't ring a bell. I don't think.
He was at the Key West Marina. I think you were down there close by, and I have a little hobby machine shop, so that's how I ended up doing bronze sheaves.
Fantastic. I see. Okay. Yeah, it's harder. It becomes harder for us to get those. I mean, especially sheaves for traditional blocks. The number of people making, traditional blocks, bits of hardware, even just getting, natural fiber line and things, the stuff to replace what we've got on board becomes trickier. Sail makers is another one. We've always had our sails made out in Kingston by Andy Soper, and he's retiring this year. So it's like, okay, cool. Who can make, a square rig topsail?
Diane, go ahead. You're still on mute, Diane. Diane, you're on mute.
Yeah, I got it. I presume I'm the last questioner, am I?
Yes, you are.
Okay, well, then I would just like to say thank you so much, Francis, for a fine presentation. You brought us up to date with what you're doing now, so important. And what you're doing is critically important to the youth who are fortunate enough to be part of this. Possibly we may get some people donating a scholarship to you for those youth that you want to reach your 50%. We do have a small token of appreciation that we give to our speakers. And since we're not in person, I just wanted to ask if it would be all right to send that token to your office, or if you would give me an address, you could email it to me afterwards. Sure. It's up to you, but just let me know where you would like that token of appreciation sent. And with that, I would just like everybody to give Francis and Emily a big round of applause. Can we get our full screens here now, Graham?
Well, yeah,
just go to the, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Right, so we don't, there we are. So would everybody just give our speaker a nice big round of applause, a silent
bravo.
You really did a good job, and thank you so much for being part of our presentation to Shellbacks. It's been a while. I think it's been 4 or 5 years since Briggs has been at Shellbacks, so it's good to have this update.
Thank
Graham,
you for listening.
do you want to pick it up from here? Or do you want me to finish off?
I can finish it off. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, next week is January 20th meeting. We'll have Judith and Aubrey Millard join us once again this year with their go home run from El Salvador to Puerto Pensacola. Aaron Fenton crewed with the Millards on this venture, and so we'll be joining them with the presentation. Upcoming is on Wednesday, January 27th, as promised. Rob Massa returns along with Doug Cowie to give us an update on the Marine Museum of the Great Lakes at Kingston. And now we'd like to give pipes out. And just a reminder that as soon as in just a moment, I'll open up the breakout rooms. But if you want to join one, you actually have to click on the join.